Is your personal brand a value driver for you?
This is the Economics for Business podcast. We are here to help all businesses become champions for customers and value, improving lives with preferred and innovative products and services. We offer you the knowledge and tools to make your entrepreneurial journey a successful one. Now, here's your host, Hunter Hastings.
Hi, Hunter Hastings here. A brand is a valuable economic asset. The term valuable in Austrian economics refers to the benefit experienced by customers and consumers. Customers assign value to brands for emotional reasons. They love their Ford F-150 pickup truck. Their Nike shoes help them feel cool. Chick-fil-A is their favorite fast food joint. Tide makes mom feel like she's running a good household, and Williams-Sonoma makes her feel like she's a well-equipped, highly competent cook. It's not the rubber and the aluminium or the performance of the shoe fabric or the chicken sandwich or the chemical detergent or the pots and pans that generate these feelings. It's the brand. The Austrian economists observe how perceived value translates into willingness to pay on the customer's behalf. And for brands, the willingness to pay often includes a premium price versus unbranded or more poorly branded alternative choices, and a loyalty and repeat purchase pattern. These customer behaviors stream back to the corporation as cash flow. Brands can be thought of as value drivers and hence sources of cash flow. The CFROI, or cash flow return on investment, of building brands is very high. That's why brand-owning corporations allocate so many resources in this direction, in the form of advertising, logo prominence, sponsorships, package design, promotion, PR, social media, and so on. They want their brands to be perceived as valuable. Brand marketing is not just communications and imagery, it's also behavior. On-time delivery, easy return policies, after-sales service for your F-150, usage advice and lifestyle guidelines and demonstrations like recipes and cooking videos for food brands and Williams-Sonoma kitchen equipment. They all reinforce brand strength. We can think of a brand as both perception and behavior. The same can be said for individuals. We want to be perceived in a certain way, and that perception has value. We want our boss to see us as a problem solver or a team leader or someone who can be given responsibility. We want our colleagues to be inspired to productive collaboration. We might want to be the go-to person for a specific skill set like coding or accounting. We want to be seen as the trusted advisor or the reliable producer. Well, guess what? You're a brand. Your behavior results in perceptions. You want to actively shape those perceptions. You never want to damage your brand. It might result in lower economic performance and reduced cash flows. You want your brand to be a value driver. Our guest today, Catherine Kaputa, devotes her marketing practice to the brand of you. She has a new book published this month with the title, The New Brand You. She's distilling a stellar career in brand marketing and advertising for some of the world's biggest brands and most effective campaigns, working for both top companies and top brand marketing agencies. And now she's helping us apply those skills to ourselves as brands. We'll learn a lot from her about brand building in general and personal brand building in particular. Catherine, welcome to the Economics of Business podcast.
Great to be here.
Well, it's great to see you, and you are an expert in a subject that we're enthusiastic about, which is the economic power of brands. You're an expert on nurturing that economic power. We'll talk about positioning and identity and relevance and differentiation, all the levels of emotional engagement that brands can take us to. And that's how value is created. It's how value is built. But we also like to tell journey stories, Catherine, and that's not precisely where you started. So perhaps you could give us your origin story as we get into this.
Right. Well, I'd like to tell you at 5 years old, I had it all figured out what I wanted to do, but that's not my experience. I had a meandering route into branding and personal branding. My first job was my dream job, curatorial assistant in Asian art at the Seattle Art Museum. And, it was like the perfect thing. I put together museum exhibits. We did some international exhibits. I started working on my PhD in Asian art. Then I was in pretty deep. Then I had my first branding crisis. Who am I? All the angst that, a lot of us have in college. And, I thought, I really don't know if I want to spend the rest of my life as an Asian art historian. And I kind of thought, well, I'm going to come to New York, the capital of the world, leave my great job, leave my PhD program, and find a job in branding or advertising or journalism, which was my first love before I switched to Asian art. So, here I am in New York City, and everywhere I went, I was branded. And I was branded as an academic, as an Asian art historian that wasn't even appropriate for an entry-level job. So, kind of figure, how can I get out of this? How can I appeal to people with my background? So I came up with the idea of positioning myself as a marketer for difficult products. And I compared marketing Asian art exhibits at the Seattle Art Museum to, I had to be more creative and inventive to attract a Western audience to our shows. And so, this whole idea of, I'm a marketer for difficult products got traction. People saw me as a marketer now, not as an academic. And that's how I got my first job in advertising at Trout and Reese Advertising. They call themselves the positioning agency. And it was a great experience. I worked with two of the guys that really kind of created the whole idea of positioning, Al Reese and Jack Trout. And, I learned a lot there. But after 4 years, I thought, gee, I want to work at a hot creative agency. I had worked at a very strategic place. And I had at this point, made some friends in New York in the ad business. And some of them, were flying out to LA, staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel, shooting commercials. And, here I am, sitting at my desk all the time doing brand strategy analysis. So, again, I was branded, but not in a way I wanted to be branded. This time I was branded as somebody that was an expert in strategy, but not a creative. Anyway, so looking for a job, I had a friend that worked at Wells Rich Green, which was one of the hot creative agencies in New York at the time. And he said, they're looking for someone to head up the I Love New York campaign, but they're looking for somebody with a lot of TV experience. And he said, you don't really qualify. And he said, by the way, I don't know if you want this to work on this account. It's a very difficult client. You have to build consensus with politicians to sell in the advertising on the I Love New York campaign. And I said, get me an interview. So he gets me an interview, and it kind of gave me an idea, when he told me the problems that the client had faced. And so, of course, during the interview, one of the first things they asked me is, why are you here? And I said, well, my specialty is working on difficult products. And then I said, and with difficult clients. And I gave examples of how I built consensus. And that's how I got the job, heading up the I Love New York campaign. The 5 years I worked there, I got a lot of TV experience. I shot commercials with Frank Sinatra, Liza Minnelli, many more, all the Broadway shows. So, think of positioning yourself so you make that bridge so people could see you in the job, solving their problem.
Well, you were certainly at the top of the top with Trout and Reese and Wells Rich Green. Those names aren't around now, but they were the best in the business at the time. And Mary Wells was a glamorous female head of an agency, which was a great rarity then.
Yeah. Very much a rarity, yes. We all had like antique furniture in our office, because a woman CEO of the ad agency. So it wasn't your normal desk, it was really, we had nice lamps and nice furniture.
Yeah, part of the positioning.
Yeah.
Then you switched across from the agency side to the client side for a while, as we call it in the business, crossing the chasm. Tell us about that. You were in Wall Street for a while.
I was in Wall Street for a while, and after I'd worked on the I Love New York campaign, it was a great campaign. I thought, well, gee, I needed to round out my resume. I wanted to get corporate experience, and again, I was branded not in the way I wanted to be branded. I was branded as an ad agency person, not somebody who could work in a corporation. I didn't have a PhD. I didn't have an MBA. So again, I was getting, very frustrated, but through networking, I got an interview. And one of the questions the executive vice president in charge of marketing and sales asked me was, it was working at Shearson Lehman Brothers, and it was working heading up all the branding and advertising globally for the corporate image campaign, as well as brokerage, retail brokerage, and investment banking. And so one of the people, the most senior person I interviewed with, said, "What makes you think you can handle the investment bankers of Lehman Brothers?" And I said, "Well, my specialty is working on difficult products and with difficult clients. I worked on the I Love New York campaign. I sold advertising into politicians and career civil servants in that job. I think I can handle the investment bankers of Lehman Brothers." And so I got this great job on the corporate side.
And that positioning has worked in multiple contexts, right? The handling of
Right.
difficult
Yeah.
problems in clients. That's brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, the moral of my story is, and I think this is true for everyone, is if you don't brand yourself, other people will. And I can tell you they're not going to brand you the way you want to be branded. That's why you want to take the reins yourself.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about your newest book. It's one of several, but the key to it is The New Brand You. It takes all your wealth of marketing and branding experience and your multiple perspectives. You created a whole new practice out of it, which we'll talk about. But I'd like a little bit to talk about the brand side before the brand of you, Catherine, just to help people who are not maybe marketing steeped like you are into how to think about positioning. We've used that word a lot, but how exactly does a marketer think about positioning? What is it? What are the techniques and methods and
Right.
analyses that go
A
on?
big part of positioning is thinking outward in. You really want to begin with your customers first. And so basically, positioning is having a differentiator that sets you apart from others who do with what you do. You must be able to answer the question, unlike others, I blah blah blah. So the whole idea of positioning began in the branding world. So how to you really look at what the competition is in the branding world, and you try to find the white space. You try to find an area that no one owns, that you could own, that's true for you. So you're looking. One of the other ways of looking at positioning is it's the space that a brand owns in the minds of customers. And it's important to think about because the right positioning is everything. Because in the world of brands, as well as the world of business, it's all about perceptions. It doesn't matter which brand is better; it's what brand customers perceive as better. And it's the same with people. One of the ways I like to look at branding is it's attaching an idea to a product. You want to attach an idea to yourself. A focused idea, being a product that does everything, is nowheresville in branding. You want to stand for one focused idea. And you want a different idea that clearly differentiates you from others in some way that's important. Branding is about contrast. So one of the things, when I was telling you about my little marketing journey, I never met anyone that used that positioning that I did, marketer for difficult products. But it worked with people because, there always were difficult products or difficult clients. And there was a problem area. And you're looking for a relevant idea. It needs to be needed and relevant. And the whole focus of my book is the new world of work. Everything is changing. Things are moving quicker and faster. And so you really want to make sure that you're relevant for the current marketplace, because pundits and futurists say that there's going to be much more rapid pace of change, and you have to really be on top of that.
Yeah, and so you're saying that brand positioning as a as a process and a skill and a set of techniques is self-applicable to us as individuals, and we think of what we're trying to achieve, get a customer or get a job or present ourselves as that's the customer. So we're selling ourselves to the customer. Is that a fair way to look at it?
Yeah. I mean, I think just like in the branding world, we all have customers. If you work at a company, your number one customer is your boss. But colleagues are customers. Senior leaders at the company are customers. So you really need to think of what perceptions do these people have of me? What do I want them to see as my strength and what my differentiator and what I stand for? So it's very helpful to, think in terms of customers, customer first, and understand that, and also understand where's the marketplace now? What are the problems? How are things changing in what I do? And how can I stay in tune with that change and be an important part of that change?
Yeah, and one of the items I noted in your book, Catherine, was a very disciplined idea that branding is about subtraction. You've said it should be
Right,
one idea that we attach to ourselves. It should be simple for people to understand. And therefore, we've got to subtract a lot of stuff and be disciplined about the
right.
one part that we want to focus on. How do I do that discipline?
Yeah, well, when I worked on the I Love New York campaign, there was a lot of pressure. You have a lot of different things that are in New York. We got museums, we got tons of restaurants, we've got Broadway theater. But what we were looking for was the unique selling proposition, the thing to hang our hat on. And that we decided that the thing that New York has that nobody else has is the glamorous nightlife. And there's only one Broadway, and it's in New York. And so all the first years of the commercials were all focused on this. Now, obviously in New York, there's many other things, just like there's many things you can do. But if you position yourself as a business person who can do everything, you really appeal to no one. And so that was why, I really wanted to convey that idea of subtraction in the book, that anything that other people do, that you do, that's too much of a Me Too idea, you want to eliminate that. You want to come up with a singular idea that's different from what other people are marketing and saying about themselves, so that you stand out and that meets a need in the marketplace. And it's, I often say you want to be able to brand yourself in a sentence. Most people are very poor at marketing themselves. When I worked at ad agencies and when I worked on Wall Street, I interviewed many people, and you'd say, tell me about yourself. And there was like, they really have a hard time answering that question. And that's why I think it's very important to think of what your key idea is, be able to brand yourself in a sentence, and then you can articulate and bring it to life, for example, and give people examples of why that positioning and how you can solve their problem. Everybody's interested in their problem. And just some of the examples I gave you, I wasn't really qualified for those jobs by the description, but I understood what their key problem was and how I could solve that for them. And that's what made all the difference. It may seem counterintuitive, but you're stronger when you narrow your focus. It's the rule of singularity in branding. The mistake most people make is, as I said earlier, trying to appeal to everyone, and you end up appealing to no one. And then you'll find out as your focus becomes narrower, you're known for one positioning idea, and people will remember that.
Yeah, I remember from my brand days, we always tried to strive for the sentence that only brand X can. So
Right,
a unique, a
right.
unique delivery capability.
Right.
So
That's a key
your book,
question to ask yourself, and I know one of
yep,
the things, I think, you had said to me earlier, well, what about, you took the brand assessment test that, I have a link in my book for the online test to figure out, what your strengths are and what the best positioning is. And, for most people, it isn't 100% in one thing. Most of us are maybe 50% this and 30%, or, maybe there's the top two, or maybe there's a top three. Um, and so how do you do that when how do you figure out where to hang your hat? And I think you wanted to look at the customers and your customers that you're marketing yourself to. What do they need? What will stand out? Where's an area that has the most opportunity? But there's ways to sort of do a mashup. When I was marketing myself, I talked to marketed for difficult products, then I expanded that difficult products and with difficult people. But also, like a client who was in financial services wanted to get hired in a business role in a dynamic, creative agency. He was working at a bank, and he wasn't getting anywhere. So one of the things he did in analyzing himself and deciding his positioning was this whole idea of being a mashup, that I have the mind of a businessman and the soul of a creative. And, it was a catchy line and it got him in the door. And one of the things he did in that vein, instead of he did some, cold calling, sending a cover letter to top digital agencies that he wanted to work at. But instead of sending like the normal resume, he put together a short PowerPoint presentation about the company and, the agency that he was marketing himself for and what he could bring to the party. And it was like a very creative, it wasn't like a PowerPoint with, 500 bullets, but, just very visual scenes, few words. It got him hired. And so he was able to make that transition, mind of a businessman, soul of a creative. I have another friend who scored high in leadership, and she wanted to be known as a leader. But one of the other things that was a differentiating thing about her and people recognized in her was she had a lot of empathy. And so we ended up putting it together as the empathetic leader. And, people liked working with her and working for her because they felt she understood them. She was on their side. So she was a very good, team leader.
A quick note. Economics for Business is a uniquely Austrian platform to help entrepreneurs build value-generating businesses at every stage of the entrepreneurial journey. We've now launched online with an outstanding database of entrepreneurial knowledge, tools to solve specific business problems, and a community exchange to share information and experiences. Check it out at econ4business.com. That's ECON, 4, business.com. Explore and let us know what works best for you in the feedback section. Now, back to our conversation.
Well, you've made tangential reference to this, Catherine. One of the wonderful things in your book is these 10 personal brand positioning strategies.
Right.
And in each one, you lay out how to think about it, how to analyze yourself, how to position yourself, how to figure out the one sentence, what the key attributes are. You mentioned one, for example, like leader. I scanned through that and I picked innovator. I would love to be known as an innovator in applying economics to business. So I looked at that, and there's lots of help. But as you said, I came out of the question on selfbrand.com that checks my proclivities, I guess you might call them. I'm an innovator, engineer, and expert, which are all very nice, but it's a mashup, as you say. So just tell me how to navigate that. Do I choose innovator first, or do I do the test first? What's your guidance?
Well, I think you do the test, but you have to really look at what's needed most in the market. Where are there fewer competitors that you can really stand out? The innovator is, one of the most powerful positioning strategies because it's, really about people who create new things, the first to do something new and innovative that others recognize. They're super problem solvers, bold risk takers. And I think that's going to be, very important in the new world of work, because they're predicting there's going to be a lot more change and dynamism. I think we're already seeing that. It's a much more digital world that we're all working in. And one of the things that's interesting when I was doing a lot of research on innovators is it isn't a eureka moment that you're hit with like a bolt of lightning and, with this great idea. Innovators work hard at coming up with innovations. That's their thing. They're looking for, and I just think when you're mentioning your background, Hunter, this whole area of economics and business, to me, it's a fresh idea. I'm not familiar with it. And that's a way to stand out, but you have to have a theory, that why it's important to apply it to business. But that's an interesting idea because it's fresh, it's new, it's white space. I haven't heard of other places that are working with that kind of idea. And, I talk in the book about a lot of brands. Apple obviously is a very innovative brand. They've MacBook, iPod, iPad, iWatch, the list of innovations go on and on. And, but they're constantly looking for what's the new big idea that we can do. And if that fits what your strengths are, you want to build on that. And we all have, the other traits that you're good in like engineer or things like that. That's a part of your strength as an innovator, because there's a bit of an engineer in most innovators, because they're looking for the white space and to create something. But it's that whole idea of the finding the new idea and putting it together, and that takes like the method as well.
Yeah, we're finding in our project it's hard work, but we're we're making progress.
Yeah,
So,
it's always hard work,
yeah.
unfortunately.
So may I ask you which of the 10 positioning strategies is most like you, or which one you're following, or
Yeah,
which ones
yeah.
you're
Well, right
combining?
now, I mean, I have my own company, self brand, so my whole focus is working with people. My whole differentiator is, unlike others who do what I do, I have a background in branding and advertising. So I apply principles and strategies from the commercial world of brands to people. And I think if you look at other people that are in this whole niche that I'm in, personal branding, they're generally people that were in HR before. And, they were career coaches, that kind of idea. And they expand to this personal branding. But I really, am steeped in the branding principles and things like that. So that's something a little different that I bring to the party. As I said, I would characterize my early years when I was marketing myself as, marketer for difficult products and with difficult people. It's really this idea of, attribute branding, owning a word. And the word I wanted to own was difficult. And I would say to people, give me your tough assignments, give me your difficult assignments. That's where I can really shine for you. And it got me in the door because other people weren't saying that. Most people didn't want to work on difficult accounts. And I felt I had a strength there because I was challenged by working with those investment bankers when I was on Wall Street. They are demanding, they make a lot of money. They're very smart, brilliant people. And, but you got to hold your ground. And if you do that and show how you can help them and, and the whole advertising business and how it can help them with their business and be more successful, then you can be successful. Right now, I'm using the expert strategy. My expertise is in branding and marketing, and I focus specifically on personal branding. And as you mentioned earlier, Hunter, I have this new book that's just came out this week, actually. But all my books have been on branding or personal branding, so I want to have a strong presence in that niche.
Yeah, you're certainly very consistent in building that up over time. You're a recognized expert.
Right.
Just to throw some variety in here, Catherine, one of the other positioning strategies I really loved reading about is the Maverick, which is a
Right.
bit topical now because of Tom Cruise and Top Gun. But there are some
Right.
situations where it's beneficial to be a Maverick, right? What would those be?
Right. It often is, because, as I thought about it and looked at Mavericks, as much as we admire leaders and strong leaders in our country, we also have a soft spot for the underdog, and for people like Maverick in the movie. And, I use examples, Steve Jobs is, poster child for being a maverick. And, he was super, super successful and did a lot of breakthroughs. And part of that positioning, and Elon Musk, I mentioned in the book, is a maverick. And we have many of them. And I think we have a soft spot for these people that don't follow the rules. That's the whole thing about a maverick. One of the things, it's also called opposite positioning or reverse positioning. So if you want to position yourself as a maverick, you're the everything the leader stands for, you're the opposite. Think of some of these names that I mentioned, but you stand out because you don't follow the crowd, you don't do what everybody else is doing, but you're very smart and you come up with revolutionary type ideas because of your maverick nature. And most mavericks dress differently than you look at Elon Musk, has a bomber jacket that he wears a lot, or Steve Jobs, of course, was famous with his turtlenecks. But they look different. They make their own rules, and maybe we don't have the courage to live that way, but we like them just the same. So, and the other thing about Mavericks is they create a lot of press. They create a lot of ink. They're so they're tend to be very high profile. We know who they are. They use social media. They use the regular media a lot. They're generally good for a quip or a quote. So, they're rule breakers, and that's what makes them very strong. And they're very creative, and they're hardworking, and they deliver a lot. And I think you tend to see mavericks in careers and industries that are more creative or innovative. But every company has some mavericks that work there because, and particularly in certain areas, product development, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, I certainly recommend the book highly because there are 7 more that we haven't discussed, 7 more positioning strategies. So it's a
Right.
it's a really interesting read. But I want to move on to some general points that apply to all of the strategies, Catherine. One of them really intrigued me was when you and I were in the branding business, we thought about what they call brand identity, which is package design and presentation and choice of colors and logos and things like that. And you said, hey, that's true in personal branding too. You got to think about your visual identity and choose it
Right.
actively and use it consistently. So can you talk
Right.
about that? It's a bit it's a
Right.
bit
Yeah. And
unusual to
I
think
think
in those
it's
terms.
similar. Yeah, I think it's similar because, as I see it, the branding process simplifying is like a 3-step process. Step number 1 is analyze to find your brand idea. And that's, developing this positioning idea, defining who your target audience is, being able to brand yourself in a sentence, having support statements, 3 reasons to believe. But step number 2 is, I'm calling it packaging, quote unquote, packaging the brand with a visual identity and a verbal identity. And, um, you know, visuals are silent ambassadors. They communicate a lot about yourself. Um, if you want to be seen as a creative person, you got to look a little creative. You don't want to look, in a super traditional outfit. So because it powerfully communicates. I was struck. We just had an election, uh, and one of the distinct people using visual identity was John Fetterman in Pennsylvania. He always wore a hoodie and shorts. Everybody else is in a business suit, and everybody running for Congress or Senate and all the meetings and rallies they were all dressed, in a typical business garb. This guy stood out. But, so what was he communicating with his look? I'm the guy, I'm the senator for the working man. I'm the right person to, if you're a working person, it's me. And I think people like that. He stood out. And, one of the things in, branding that's important is visibility. You want to be seen, you want to be known. And then that's why they spend all this money on advertising and, social media and things like that, PR, because there's an advantage. There's a premium. There's a visibility premium. The more visible you are, the odd thing is people think you're better. Somebody that's high profile, they think is better than somebody that has no profile. So, if you talk to managers, the easiest person to promote are people you know. And that's why in the new world of work, you got to think about visibility because you're not going into the office often every day, or you're working with people who are working remotely and or hybridly, and you need to figure out how to stand out in that. But yeah, part of the way I approach it is, step number 2 is packaging the brand with a visual identity and a verbal identity. And just think about that. Is there a way you want to communicate your own style, your own vibe? You don't want to be a cookie cutter looking person if you really want to use the principles of personal branding.
I was
Go
going
ahead.
right there. Verbal identity. Tell us about that, because here we are in the world of podcasting. We're audio, and
Right.
how do I think about verbal identity?
Well, I think verbal identity is, I list a number of different types of verbal identity. I mean, the first thing marketers think about if they're creating a new product is, what am I going to name this product? It's a very important strategic decision. What are we going to call it? And a name can make or break you. Now, of course, we don't give ourselves a name. We're born and parents generally give us a name. Um, but names can help or hurt you too, just the same. And I think that, historically in the past, a lot of celebrities or people that want to be celebrities simplified their names if they had a complicated name. And, everyone's going to Google you. So you want to be findable. And that, that's why I mentioned, you may want to think about if you have a very common name to include a middle initial or a middle name or a double barreled last name. Because you want a name that's easy to remember, ideally different, and, so that you can be found on search. Podcasts are really interesting because the power of voice. I talk a little bit about voice as brand, and your voice is a very powerful tool. No voice is exactly like yours. We're all got a unique voice. And I think in the business world, you want to be, part of verbal identity is your communication skills. How are you at meetings? How are you at presenting? Do you raise your hand and participate? All of those things you want to think of. One of the little stories I mentioned in the book is Fiona Hill. She had a distinctive British accent during President Trump's first impeachment trial, and even Trump said he loved her accent. He didn't like her testimony, but he loved her accent. So she got a lot of attention from her presentation, certainly, but that voice helped her too, from a personal branding standpoint. She came out with a book not too long ago about her background. And of course, she's an expert in Russia and the Ukraine. But, she talks about her accent. And, apparently it's a lower class Northeastern British accent. Well, you're from Britain. You from Britain?
It's my part of the world. And actually the accents we carried around from Northern England were looked down upon by the aristocrats in the South, but that's changed over time, and now it's become authentic and real and so on. So she's not posh, as we would say.
Right.
But yeah, she was very distinctive. You always knew when it was her who was talking.
I mean, it was incredible, and I think that I read that too because of where she was, and everybody that was British knew tell it right away, and it was a working class accent.
Yeah,
but Americans, we like accents, and it makes you more distinctive.
Yep. So you have a great little phrase that sums all of this up, Catherine, in the book, which is become a little bit famous.
Right.
So kind of, what is it? Try be a celebrity in your own small circle, or what do you mean when you tell us to do that?
You want to be visible. You want to be visible, and in some arena, it could be. In your company, it could be in your department, it could be in your industry, it could be a specialty group, that your company supports. But I think, you want to think about visibility and being known for something. And that's where, a lot of people think, oh, I don't want to be a self-promoter, but I'm not talking about somebody that's, bragging about themselves or, overindulging in social media posts and things like that. Nobody likes a showboater that, dominates, but you want to have a presence and you want people to know your accomplishments, and you have to figure out a way to, that's why I think, part of being a little bit famous is having a LinkedIn profile that's thoughtful and really defines your brand and gives people examples, and having a nice picture that you want to convey the image that you want to convey. Very important to have visibility. Brands, as I said earlier, spend a lot of money on advertising. They spend a lot of money on, PR and things like that because there's a visibility premium, and you're more likely to be hired if, I heard of her or I heard of him, must be good, or I never heard of this person, must not be as good as the person I've heard their reputation. So you really want to, cultivate, a little bit famous, in some arena, that can, so that people know, oh, she's strong in this, that people understand your identity and the value that you bring to a business situation. Now with hybrid working and remote working, it was easy to be invisible in the old world of work when we went to work every day. But it's much harder now if you're working remotely, or, a lot of people are a little worried about it, that fear of missing out, FOMO, it's, and frankly, they have a reason to be a little afraid of it, because visibility is important for brands. And, there's the communications theory about rich media versus lean media. And rich media is the strongest. And rich media is in-person meetings. And, it's real time. You can, you have all the dimensions, light, sound, visuals. You can read people's body language, so it's a very powerful way to communicate. Also in rich media, not as powerful as in person, is Zoom meetings, video meetings, where you can, see the other person. And it's real time, but you're not there in person. But in contrast with rich media, and which a lot of people that are working remotely are focusing on, lean media is emailing and emails and texting. And, email is, isn't that emotional. It's harder to have a connection to people when you're building your relationship mainly on email. So that's why you want to have some video meetings, even if it's just one-to-one. Have some video meetings so that there's more of an opportunity under rich media for connection. But email is good if you have like a status report or detailed information you want to send. And as we know, text signals immediacy. So if you have something short and quick that you need a response on, it's a good way to do that. But I think that, a lot of remote people don't have enough. And frankly, if you're working remotely, you want to work at a remote friendly company that will, have events where you can meet people in person, and that kind of thing. That's important because it's easy. The first person to lose their job are people that are invisible in a company. That's like, I don't know them. I don't know what they do.
Right. Well, in fact, to that point, Catherine, you say in the book that in this day and age, personal branding is not just important, it's necessary. It's not optional, you say. We've got to
Right.
do this for this new environment that we're in. So reading your book will help, but what else should I be doing besides that in terms of developing the skills to succeed in
I
this
think we need
world?
everybody, when I was talking about the three-step process, the third step is marketing brand you. And I think most people leave our experience to chance. And I think you need to come up with a marketing plan for yourself. And it could be as simple as, focusing on developing a strong LinkedIn presence, see if there's other social media that is important, getting involved in your company if they have ERGs or employee resource groups or things like that. But you want to take charge. I think most people leave everything to chance and they don't realize there's a lot you can do. And, think in terms of markets. What are the different markets that you're in? Your customers, your clients, and things like that. You want to figure out a game plan, not only positioning yourself, but also steps that you're going to take to have more visibility and more connection.
What's the best way to find out what the perception of other people is of me now that I might want to change?
Right.
It's hard to
Yeah,
ask
that's a
them.
good question. I think number one, listen to people give you a lot of information. So listen to what people compliment you on. What does your boss compliment you on? What do people criticize you for? Your boss criticizes you for? That's getting information. And if you're in an in-person meeting, who sits near you? Who doesn't? All of these things, give you information. And it's listening to them, listening to, what people say and about you, or ask them after you gave a presentation, how do you think it went? And just listen. Don't get defensive if they're offering criticism. But there's a lot of ways of getting information by just observing and or even asking, how do you think this meeting went? When I presented that idea, how do you think? Do you think people got it, or do I need to communicate it in a better way? So it's a little of this and a little of that. You
Yeah.
could even say, "Hey, I'm working on personal branding, and I'd love to have coffee with you and get your thoughts on how do you see me? What are my strengths?" And think of these positioning strategies. If you were, ask them questions. If I were a famous person, who would it be? The kind of things we would do in, advertising research. If I was a famous person, if I was a car, which one would it be and why? And listen to what people say. And I think you can And if you're positioning yourself or the way you want to be positioned is not being conveyed by other people, you got to think of what you can do to communicate better so that people understand what your value is.
Good. Well, Catherine, this is wonderful, and about thinking about the customer first, even when you're positioning yourself, and using the techniques of positioning and marketing planning
Right.
and so on. We'll link to your book.
Thank you.
Tell us about your website where I took the test. Anybody can do that, right? What is that?
Right. Well, it actually is a link that is in the book. So it's not something I have on the website. I have a short version of it that's on the website, but the longer version of the test that's much more detailed is in the book on chapter 3. It is. But I think the key thing I want to leave people with is, branding can be subtle or grating. It can be engaging or self-centered. But if you don't participate, you're going to be left behind. You're branding yourself whether you think you are or not, because even doing nothing says something. People are going to Google you, and they're either going to find a strong LinkedIn profile and brand presence. And, I think everyone should have a website. And they'll either find a strong profile, a weak one, or nothing, so it's up to you.
Yep. Great advice, Catherine. Thank you so much for today. As I say, we'll link to your book. We'll link to your website, and you can be found on YouTube as well. So
Yes.
just by searching your name, is anywhere else we should look for you?
Well, the key thing is selfbrand.com, my website, selfbrand.com. And, Google me, you'll see what I'm up to. Obviously, I have a new book that just came out this week. So I'm writing some pieces here and there, and doing interviews. And thank you for inviting me. And it's an evolving thing. It's the whole thing about branding is it never ends. It's never like I'm finished. Everything's great because the world is too dynamic. It's changing. And so you have to modify your brand, or maybe you have different challenges or different goals at different phases of your life.
Good. Well, thank you very much again, Catherine. And I really enjoyed the book. I really recommend it to listeners. It's a great personal value as well as business value. So we'll get a lot from it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Economics for Business is a production of the Mises Institute. To explore more content like this, visit econforbusiness.com. And for more from Hunter Hastings, visit hunterhastings.com.